Welcome, y'all. It's Wes with DIY Food Plot Pro. Thank you so much for joining us. On today's episode, we're going to talk about what I would plant if I had one large plot and that's all I had to plant. I've already went over what I would plant as a summer food source on a small plot, and I've also went over what I would plant on that small food source to hunt over in the fall and the winter time. But as I think about this through the eyes of the outfit that I run, the 1,800 acres, I have several farms where I have one large food plot. That's all I have. I don't really have 3 or 4 different places where I can plant a variety of different things. I have one, pretty good sized plot on the farm to hunt. So I wanted to talk about that today and what I would plant, how I would plant that, and what are some of the specifications that I'm looking at in determining what food plots go where on those farms that just have one larger area for a food plot. Well, my name is Wes. I run the channel DIY Food Plot Pro. I've got a Bachelor of Science in Agronomy degree. I farm for a living, and then I run an 1,800 acre whitetail deer hunting outfitter in Western Kentucky where we cannot bait. So we rely heavily on the food plots to hunt the whitetails that we get to hunt in Western Kentucky. When I start breaking down a farm as far as what I'm going to plant, the first thing that I'm looking at is I'm mapping out the number of acres and I'm looking at how fertile that ground is. The lower quality of the soil, the less it's going to produce, and which means I'm going to have to plant more acres to keep the deer off. At the forefront of all thoughts when starting a food plot plan is quality of soil, size of the acreage that you're going to plant, and the number of mouths that you are going to feed. In Western Kentucky, we are blessed with a very large herd. I guess blessed or cursed, either which way you want to look at it. Very difficult for raising smaller food plots. This field here is around a 2.5 acre food plot. Would I come in here and plant a monocrop? So would I come in here and just plant all corn or all soybeans to hunt over? Or would I come in here and I split this into 3 or 4 different plots and try to plant a few different things in here and have a little bit of variety for the whitetails? I take a different approach to this than I feel like what most folks do, because I see the power a little bit more so in standing corn and standing beans for those later in the year hunts. I think those are standalone, the very best plots you can possibly have that very, very few of your neighbors are going to have. To me, that plays a huge role in finding out the limitations on and around your property and filling them. I would say 95% of food plotters are going to have some sort of cereal grain or a clover. They're not going to have standing corn or standing beans. That will make your property stand out during those stressful times later on in the season, especially as you get into December, January. Those properties that have standing corn, standing beans can be absolutely dynamite. They weren't this year. I'm very transparent with that. They were not the number one thing this year. Last year was one of those years that was really a freak thing. I've never seen it be that bad. That's just a testament of how many white oak acorns were out there for those deer to eat. It was really just keeping them off a lot of the plots, plus the warm weather, that didn't help anything either. If I'm looking at wanting to be as diverse as I possibly can, I want to plant plots that are the most desired during the hunting season, right? Because it's not going to do us any good if we have the most desired food source in May. We obviously can't hunt then. So we want the most desired food source to be in September, October, November, December, whatever months in there that you're hunting. That's when we want those foods to peak on the whitetail's preferred list. In my opinion, that's grains. As we all know, the whitetail's body transitions from a higher protein food source into a higher carbohydrate diet in the fall, which is acorns, grains, corn, soybeans. Those things like that are much higher on a whitetail's diet during the fall, which is when most of us are hunting them. That's not to say that these other plots don't have a place, but that is the way that I look at this, is if I can at all, I want to have standing corn or standing beans as the primary food plot on the place. Now, here's where it gets tricky. I don't want just standing corn or just standing beans on the farm, especially if I'm in a spot like this. I've got 2.5 acres. To me, that's about the threshold in our area for being able to raise standing corn. I've done it on smaller plots. It is really tricky, especially with soybeans. If you can't protect it, boy, it can really get tricky anything under about 3 acres. Extreme high density deer zones where deer are not scared of a lot of people. They're around a lot of people, heavy ag areas. It can take maybe 5 acres to get into that area to where you can have actual bean pods to hunt over in the hunting season. So the way that I like to set this up is I've got a plot here that I feel like is big enough for me to raise standing corn. I'm pretty familiar with this area. That is not going to be an issue here. I can raise 2.5 acres of standing corn here. Will I lose some of this plot? 100%. More than likely, I will lose at least a minimum of the outside 24 rows will be completely wiped out, completely void of any corn. All the way around this food plot is heavy, dense cover. So it's going to hold a tremendous amount of whitetails. They're going to feed on that corn all summer long. That is the reason that I like to start out with one of those bigger crops, corn or soybeans. Because if I plant, let's say half this field, 1.25 acres into corn, then the rest I'm going to leave off for right now, and I'm going to come back and I'm going to plant that into this fall, to a fall mixture to add some diversity to the plot. The issue is I'm going to have 1.25 acres, and let's just say for easy figuring, it makes 100 bushel corn. So it makes 125 bushels of corn, 50 pounds a bushel, roughly 6,000 pounds. Now you got to take deer damage out of it. From 1.25 acres standpoint, if they eat half of it, which is that wouldn't be uncommon. So they've ate roughly 1/2 acre. Then all of a sudden you're left with about 3/4 of an acre of standing corn is all you're left with. You have a tremendous amount of other food sources that you can add around that. The problem is 3/4 of an acre of corn on a year where deer are really utilizing that corn food plot is not much corn. They can eat that down unbelievably fast. This is the first year since I have had the outfit that I was not hoping and praying we were going to have enough corn to get through the December muzzleloader season. That's how tight it normally is. And I'm planting big plots. I'm planting 3, 4, 5 acre plots, and these things are getting completely wiped out many times before January even rolls around. A large deer herd can really put a dent on something like 1/2 to 3/4 acre food plot. So what I like to do is plant the entire food plot into corn. Let the deer eat what they're going to eat. They're not going to eat all of this in my case. They're going to eat some of it. Let's say they eat 1 acre of it. Okay, well then I'm left with 1.5 acres of corn. And then all of a sudden I can go back and I can add the food around to add diversity to the plot. So I can go back and I can add the cereal grains. I can go back and add the annual clovers that I like to in the fall, the brassicas. Then I can really spice this plot up. And all of a sudden I'm going to have a whole bunch of different food sources in this one plot, rather than going out here and planting in the middle of 3/4 acre corn plot. And then by the end of summer, time season rolls around, there's nothing left. I plant the entire plot, and then I'll fill in on spots where the deer, the coons, whatever, have wiped it out over the summer months. And in my case, that's always going to be a fairly significant area. Every single food plot that I plant standing corn in or standing beans in, there are areas to fill in. That is usually no trouble whatsoever to find those areas. Let's change the scenario a little bit and help out other folks. Let's say you've got a big food plot and that's all you've got. Then what do? Let's say that you're running on maybe a 6 acre plus food plot, very large destination food plot. I've got a couple of those, very few. What do I recommend on those? If you can get over that 6 acre plus mark where you can have 3 acres of each, then all of a sudden I'm a whole lot more game for adding corn to half the side and beans to the other half the side. And then we can go in later on as those plots get thinned down during the summer months by the whitetails and other wildlife, and we can add a lot of diversity to those plots. But I wouldn't recommend splitting a 2 acre field into half corn, half soybeans, at least not in my area. What's going to happen is you're going to end up not having any of either. That's typically the case in my area, especially when you start talking soybeans. Soybeans can really, really be difficult to raise in smaller type environments when you are looking for the seed. Now, many of you know I've talked about planting just for summer food. You can do that relatively easy on smaller plots as long as you follow what I've said in my other videos. That works really, really well. But for actually trying to grow seed, those soybeans for the deer to eat in the fall and winter months, you must either fence it or you must have a very large land and a low deer density that can withstand that browsing pressure, because whitetails love soybeans during the summer months. So that is the way that I set these fields up to maximize the amount of acres that I have. That's what we have to do as food plotters and land managers. Most of us don't have an unlimited supply of food plot land in ideal locations where we can plant a variety of different things here and here and here and here and still be okay. We have one or two pretty good sized plots that we got to plant. We got to be as efficient with those as we possibly can. That's how I do this. I start out with a crop such as corn or soybeans, plant the entire thing, and time the fall rolls around, I can transition those areas and get different food plots in and amongst those. I know a question that I'm going to get a lot is on the residuals, because I do use a lot of residual herbicides. Is that something that messes with the fall plots? And in some case it can. If you're going to apply a residual late in the season, 100% that can be a major issue. Most of my residuals are applied in the spring, and so you're talking 5 months before planting, and they're really not as big of an issue, especially if you have plentiful rainfall that year. If you get into a drought situation where the herbicide is just sitting there and it's not getting used, it's not really being activated, you can get into some issues. And there are some herbicides that have a very long plant back period that you need to be aware of. Any herbicide that you are going to apply, you need to look at the label and it'll tell you it's called a plant back period. And that plant back period might be 6 months, it might be 3 months, it could be up to a year on some of the very stoutest chemicals that we have. You need to look at that and plan ahead. This is not something that you need to go out there and start spraying and then look at the label later on. That really can set you up for a lot of failures with your fall plots. Most residuals are going to be fairly short-lived. They're going to last a month to 2 months. You should still read that label and make sure that whatever you're planting behind that does not have a negative effect from that herbicide, such as that does happen at times to where you spray a residual herbicide and it may have a 1 year plant back period to plant cereal grains on. So it's something you definitely need to be aware of. Definitely read the label before you start going out there and spraying that field. If you need help setting up your food plots or setting up your farm, I have a website set up, www.diyfoodplotpro.com. I have a yearly subscription where I can help you over email, over text message with some of your food plot questions and things like that. And I also have a boots on the ground consultation that I'm booking for the winter of 2025. I will start in January doing property visits. I'm already beginning to get booked up. I'm not going to do a tremendous amount of them. I'm going to do some throughout the wintertime months from say January maybe until April or May. And at that point, that'll be all I'm doing for the year. So if that's something that interests you, you can go to www.diyfoodplotpro, click contact us, send me your name, and I'll be in contact with you, and we can try to get you on the list. So thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Smash that like and subscribe button.